So you want to build trees. You want to make cool looking bonsais out of scrap copper wire. Well, here's how you do it. I started with a core. I'll twist it up. I just took some of the thicker stuff. I picked up this Romex really cheap on Facebook Marketplace, and I've been stripping it. And I just twisted it up in a vise with a drill. And now I'm going to do this part, which is going to require me to cut this tape. And typically the next step of the process would be to take these core pieces and cut, untwist them, make some roots, kind of like this. But I'm just going to skip that for now, because I can always do that at a slightly later date. I'm going to go with 2 wraps around the base just to get it secured. Then I'm going to grab a single strand, if I fucking can, and just start going around. Now, at this point, once it reaches the fork, I try to go to the farthest point first. Because when you do the farthest ones first, those wraps are going to be under all the other ones. I like the way that looks better. And you're also setting yourself up for the future, so that if you have to use shorter ones, then you can. And you don't have to go get wire in order to make it. There's a proportion that I like to try to follow. And that is, for each one of these core pieces, I like to try to do 4 of the smaller wires. If I can, of course. I do think I have enough, so I will be able to do 4. So that once you reach the end, like this, you don't have to wrap it super duper tight. Yeah, it's just banging around. And then you have all this excess. I like to just give it, let's say about 5 inches or so, and just chop it off. That way it's not just everywhere and annoying and difficult to work around. Now, for demonstrative purposes, I'm going to wrap 2 at the same time on this next one, so that you can see the difference. And already on the trunk, you can kind of see that there are places where they're spaced out, like this one and this one. These are the ones that were wrapped individually, and right next to it are some grouped ones, and those are the ones that are wrapped together. And this is going to happen all the way up the tree, and as you're wrapping it around, you're inducing a twist into it. And so they're going to be more or less anchored to each other. And if you want a lumpier kind of look, you can do that. But if you want something that's a little bit smoother, then don't. But I kind of tend to lean towards the lumpier, more natural look, because I think it more accurately reflects the way that trees look in real life. Here's a problem. So I'm wrapping these 2 together. It's really very difficult to see. But one wants to go over the branch, the other wants to go under it. And so this is a complication that can happen when you're wrapping 2 at the same time. You can just separate them separate them, pull them over the branch, and continue. It does cut down on the time, but it gives you a different looking final product. It is especially noticeable on the small branches. So you're going to come with me for a minute. And see, if you look, you can see there's points where it kind of wraps over itself, and it looks very different than the ones up here. So this is almost done. As you can see, there's a pretty significant difference between the thickness in the body on the sides that I've wrapped and the sides that I haven't. And I'm actually running out of wires to wrap this with, so I'm gonna go ahead and process a few more, and you're gonna get to watch. So the best way to do it is with a power drill. And I have a vise over here. And once it kind of opens up like that, it's done. I'm free it from the vise, and now I have some wires that I can pretty easily separate into their individual strands. You can do this manually. It sucks. I've done it. You're basically taking like maybe 2 or 3 of them and then just manually going all the way around. It's a waste of time. That one did not work that well. I think one of the strands came loose. But it's loose enough to pull apart. Now for actually pulling these apart, the best way that I have found to do it, and this is the manual way to do it, where you just take it and just do like that, is to loosen up both ends, step on the one side, and then just pull one strand out at a time. Wouldn't this be easier if you were to buy a spool of wire and then just cut them to length? Barely. Barely. It's also more expensive. There's a lot of electrical shops you can go and you can be like, hey, I'd like some scrap wire, please. They're like, great, what you looking for? And you're like, 10. And they have a fucking truckload of it, so. And you're like, I'll give you 10 cents on the scrap price. And they're like, all right, deal. How much do you want? And you can take it all. All right, so we're about halfway done here. Graceful. And I decided that I'm going to start going on the roots because I have enough stuff here that I can start finalizing the root shape. Whereas before it would have just made it a lot more difficult to work with, right? So I've got this little ponytail here that I can just keep wrapping off of, and then I can separate all this stuff and put it on the roots. But now deciding on what shape you want the roots to be, you have to consider what kind of pot you're putting it in. This one's kind of tall and narrow, and it doesn't have a hole in the bottom yet, but I'll fix that. And so the roots can't be too wide, otherwise they're gonna either scratch up the inside of the pot or just be difficult to mount. However, if I were to use a pot like this, which is a much smaller squatter pot, then the roots can be a lot more open, kind of like this one, where I kind of went with a more mangrovey, kind of a more mangrovey style on the roots. where they're kind of open and visible. So these are the considerations when it comes to finishing it. So to start with the roots, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start separating some of these strands, which these are fairly thick. And so when they're wound real tight like this, they can really be a bear to get your hands on. This is actually a great start, honestly. So what I'm going to do is, only because this section is going to be wrapped in a bunch of wire or buried, I'm going to use some tools on it. So on more delicate or visible sections, you really do not want to do this because it's just going to be obvious. Boom. There we have the base of our roots. Nice and tightly wound. That's really difficult to see. Nice and tightly wound so that I have a place to function as the root of the root, and I could start branching off of. So this one I'll take 3, 3, and then this 4 will break into 2 at some point. And I can twist these guys up. Best way to twist thick wires like this is to bend an elbow and then just wrap it around itself. And then boom, got a little twist. And even if you have really uneven lengths of wire like this, I actually prefer to do it that way because then you get a more alive, kind of natural look. Now, I didn't decide which pot I'm going to put this in. I kind of like the idea, like I don't know what the final shape of this is going to be either. Because of how long it is, I'm thinking like a live oak kind of thing could look pretty cool. But again, I'm not sure. We'll just see what happens. Because something might change. I might decide that I want to make like a bunch of these like palm frondy looking things and do it nice and tall and straight like an aspen. Who knows? But yeah, so here's the bottom of our root ball. And we're just going to straighten that back out a little bit so it's easier to work around. And continue wrapping the other side. Making progress. Next, I'm going to take coils like this, which I just spin up on the drill, and some smaller coils so that I can make the leaves. Since the tree is now complete, and I have all of these twisted up all the way out to the end. You can see every single one has small strands all the way to the end. So I'm ready to start making leaves so that I can attach them. And that requires 3 thicknesses of wire. One is the core, one is the leaves, which as you can see is a lot thinner and flimsier in the spring form than the core, and a very, very thin gauge of wire for the winding to actually attach them. An important aspect of this is to wind the leaves counterclockwise while the core is clockwise. That way when you flatten it out, it looks better. Now the only way to get this thing out is to take the screwdriver off, remove it. Usually I'll try to finish the winding just to get an extra few loops. It makes it useful to have some sacrificial loops on the end of your spring. Cutter free. And we're ready to go. I'm gonna make like 5, 6 more of these, and then I'll show you the next part. All right, I've got several of those completed, so I'll just show you the next step. The next step is using this socket that I have wrapped in tape, so it's a little grippier. I take one of these, and I just put my fingernails underneath one of the loops and just start stretching it out. And as you can see, there are certain spots where it stretches more than others, so you're going to have to go in and manually stretch those areas, because you want it to be somewhat even, as close as you can get without, fucking it all up. So this one's going to go back in a little bit, this one's going to come out a little bit. And this is pretty close. Everything else you can do after you roll it flat. So you take one of these, we're going to take the socket, and we're going to start on one end, and you're just going to roll it, or flatten it with your finger first, that way you have a way to start. You just roll it, and it likes to roll up and around the socket, so I'm going to roll it the other way as well. And so yeah, it coiled up real bad, so just going to flip it over, flatten her out. And then, once we're here, you're going to take it, you're going to pull it so that the edges are just barely touching. So you don't want it like this, you want it like this. I'm going to do a big long one on the whole length, just to get everything nice and evened out and straight, and it's not trying to run anywhere. I'll take one of these. And these are a lot thicker, so they're a little bit harder to work. So I like to use tools for this part. Then I will just stretch this guy out. Again, it's uneven, as you can see. So go ahead and do your best to even it out. Excellent. Pretty happy with this. This part could use a little more something. Alright. So now that we have this, I'm going to grab our winding. And I'm going to get the vise out of the way for this. And we're going to just go ahead and grab a length of it. Doesn't need to be super duper long. And the getting started is always the hardest part. So first thing I like to do is I will take a little small piece of this wire and wrap it around the very end. First things first. Pass one loop through, pull my winding through, which is very, very difficult to see. You can see that the wire is in there, and then I just go around. Then I hit the next one, and the next one. And as I go, I will pull the wire taut so that it kind of sucks it down onto the core, and it starts looking like this. And then you just do that like about 1 billion times. And then you can stretch it out nice and straight, and it ends up looking like this. Turn the vise a little bit. So, I have some wire that's been stripped. I'm just going to secure it in the vise. Right, then I take my drill. I pull it taut, going backwards. Alright. That's not how that's supposed to go.